All right, acceleration problem. So what's the acceleration of a unicycle that goes from 3 meters per second to 5 meters per second in 7 seconds? So first thing we need to do is we need to draw our diagram. So here is my unicycle. That's fine. Okay. And then I go through my problem. So what is the acceleration? So that's A. Of a unicycle that goes from 3 meters per second. So from 3 means velocity because it's meters per second. To 5 meters per second, that's also velocity. And it does it in 7 seconds. Now, I can see a problem here already. And the problem I've already got is I have two V's. And I can't have two V's because if I'm plugging into an equation, how do I plug in two different V values? I just can't do that. So I need to decide which is which. So we're going to define two more terms here, VI and VF. So VI is initial velocity. And VF is final velocity. So that's how I tell my velocities apart. So it said he went from 3, so that's VI, that's what I started at, to 5, which is VF, so that's what I ended with. Okay, so now I need to draw my diagram. So I'm going to start by drawing the velocity acting on the unicycle. So VI is my starting velocity, 3 meters per second. Okay, it says what is the acceleration? So just like I drew distance as like a line underneath, I'm going to do the same thing with acceleration, but acceleration has a direction, so I'm going to make it an arrow underneath. And it says, what is the acceleration? So A equals question mark. Okay, time, I just write off to the side like I've been doing. And lastly, I need to draw my final velocity. So the way I do that is I draw a second unicycle, kind of like a before and after. And I draw a larger arrow because I'm going faster now. And I write VF, 3 meters per second. I'm going to run out of room real fast. Okay. I drew my diagram. I labeled my knowns and unknowns. So now I'm ready to set up the equation. Okay, so the equation we've been using is V equals d over t. And this equation will not work because this is the average velocity. And we're not going in average velocity. We're changing our velocity. So we have to use a different equation. And that's this guy up here. A equals delta V over t. All right, you're probably saying to yourself, Mr. B, what on earth is this triangle business? Well, it's the Greek letter delta, which you totally all knew, and it means change. So delta V means change in velocity. So how do I find a change in velocity? The way I find a change is always final minus initial. So, since we're talking about acceleration, we're going to use the acceleration equation. So the equation I need is A equals delta V over t. And the way I find that is I do A equals change in velocity, final minus initial. And I even wrote it up here too, so you don't have to memorize it. It's on there. But I want you to get familiar with the terminology. So the final was how fast I went at the end. totally wrote 5 the first time. 5 minus the initial, which was 3, divided by the time, which is 7. So 5 minus 3 is 2 over 7, 0.28. So you go about doing it the same way. It's the same setup, same methods, same everything. Okay? However, you're using a new equation, and you're using 2 new variables that you're not used to, VF and VI, so be careful with that. So if there's an acceleration, there's always going to be an initial and a final. So here's what I want you guys to do. I want you to go ahead and work on 9 through 11. Okay? I want you to work on 9 through 11. And try to get those done first. When you finish them, then you can go back to whatever you need to finish. Go back through 6 and those kind of things. I'm going to check your practice before you leave. I want to check this practice before you go. I also should mention, if you haven't turned in the lab, make sure you get the lab turned in. Some of you did not have it done yet, and I gave you a little extra time. So if you have not turned in the lab, make sure you get that turned in today. But work on the practice and get finished with that. Once you're done, let me check it, and I'll mark you down. And then we'll move on to, I'll give you practice 2 to get started on. Practice 2 is not homework. It's just practice 1 needs to get checked off on you before you go. Okay? So start with 9, 10, and 11. I will be happy to check your answers if you'd like me to. I'll post them up here in a little bit so you can see the answers. But I wanted to make sure to give you that example to kind of work off of, and I'll leave it up here for you to look at.